morning, everyone. Community and Economic Development Committee. I'm John Weddleton.
Dick Tran.
Pete Peterson.
Terry Schwanko.
Francis McLaughlin.
Jan Alpine.
Lou Weaver. Rob Burks.
Ryan Yell.
Randy Honest.
Rob Burks.
Hi. Okay, thank you. So today we've got on the agenda, anybody got anything to add? Okay, all good. Alaska slow burn cannabis. So what we generally do here sitting here in Jan, those routines, there'll be manual talk, then Ryan will talk a little bit about it. We'll have mostly talk with assembly members. And if you want to speak, just raise your hand. We'll get you. Something like that. We try not to do conversations. So does that work okay? Okay, good. So, Mandy, you want to cover this?
So all of the general licensing requirements have been met. There weren't any past due taxes, fees, or fines. We got a plan approval notification from the health department. And then there was a supplemental that was submitted to address a deficiency with their operating plan that was regarding safe storage of concentrated so refrigeration and all of that. And they added that, so now everything is good.
Okay, thank you. Ryan,
Mr. Chair, the applicant, Louis Weaver of AKA Slow Burn Cannabis Outlet, is applying for a special land use permit for a marijuana retail sales establishment with a total of approximately 2,685 square feet to be licensed retail space. The establishment will be occupying one unit of the commercial duplex within a D3 district located on the southwest corner of 3rd Avenue in Unger. Due to site constraints, the petitioner has chosen to develop Lot 12 directly south. The retail store location for use is off-site parking. Considering the existing and proposed uses of the building, 16 parking spaces must be provided. Non-conforming rights have been established with a lack of 5 parking spaces, resulting in a final determination that 11 parking spaces, with one being van accessible, shall be provided. In accordance with municipal code, the van accessible parking space must be provided on site. It appears there is adequate space on the north side of the building to locate a van accessible parking space. The remaining 10 parking spaces could be located on Lot 12. Because Lot 12 is a new development, site perimeter landscaping shall be provided in accordance with municipal code. It is noted that site plans submitted to the planning department do not match plans submitted with the state application. It is advised that the applicant will solve this issue with ANCO, provided site plans do not show any major alterations to the building facade or structure that would make it of a similar character, scale, or size when compared to surrounding structures. Planning department recommends approval of the special use permit, subject to the condition of this taking effect.
okay, thank you. Any comment? I had, okay, so I was looking at the parking and it was inconsistent. Packet here, so where should they go? But you could sell on the park spot and then there was an empty lot nearby.
So there is a vacant undeveloped lot to the south of the petition site, and that is where the petitioner is looking to develop their parking lot. They don't have any space on lot 1 for the required parking, but they do have to provide a van accessible space, and it does appear that they'd be able to fit one on the north side of the building that would be parallel with 3rd Avenue. The parking that's in there right now is not permitted, and nor do they have enough space to fit a legal parking space if they were to put something in there. So the original plan showed 5 parking spaces on the north side of the building and then 5 being developed off-site. That has since been revised, or there needs to be, Creek needs to be revised, so that those 5 spaces would not be permitted, and then all of the non-ADA annexable parking would have to be located off-site.
So is this this is the real plan now? 68, page 69. That's an error, there's a couple, 67 has a schedule. But there it says 28 parking spaces.
Correct. So this is the state application, and that's where that inconsistency comes in. Is in the state application they're showing a development of 28 parking spaces, but in the plan provided to us, it only says 5 on that off-site parking.
Okay, so that's the one on
in advance to that owner, and so we're gonna develop this lot into, a parking lot, and it's going to be, this layout is going to change, because we're working with Stephanie on like what's the best way that she wants to do it. But it's gonna change, so we have all the off-site parking going to be on lot 12.
So lot 12 is vacant, someone else owns it, you have a parking
It's
agreement.
recorded.
And someone's going to have to do landscaping, pavement, and all that.
Right, that's us. Yeah. So it's unfortunate we have to do that. We didn't anticipate having to do the landscaping around the perimeter because, you know, we were thinking less than 10 feet to do that. So we're still working that out, you know, with zoning and traffic. But I think, you know, the main thing was getting Brandy and stuff on how to safely develop that and design that. And I think we've got that.
Okay, for the tape recorder, Amy Demboski has joined us, and Bruce Schulte. Okay, so we got that, because somewhere it said shared parking agreement with the municipality.
Was it one of the earlier pages?
Is that what's going on
That's
here?
correct, yeah. So they established a shared parking agreement, and our land use review section writes that up, and we just report on the property.
Oh, so it's not municipality? it's
No,
not lot, it's
no,
just
no.
you. Okay, just
Yeah,
following.
the municipality is just a party to it.
We're a party to it.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So the same thing.
Then somewhere in here, I think the building owner's letter said, we know retail zoning, we're good with that cultivation later.
Yeah, we're thinking about taking that other half and developing it into cultivation. Right now, I'd say wholesale glass. Is that glass? They, they sell it to contractors. So like a contractor, you know, makes a point with them, they go in, but they're all month to month, and you know, so we have the option for that second unit.
The owner's turned 70 July 1, and the mother of the wife said she's leaving July 2.
Okay, well,
And there has been a state application initiated for cultivation, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have not received
Yeah,
confirmation that that application is complete yet.
I still don't. We need to start this.
okay, so now you have to go back to the state because of the parking.
Not because of the parking, no. If there was, it changes in our, inside of our site diagram, like inside the licensed premise area, and are you noting changes in there?
Yes.
Okay, so, and that might be true because we've, you know, had different hired contractors and now actually getting in there, so there'll be like adjustments. So we'll have to file what's called an MJ-14, and that has to be approved by your department before the state will even look at it.
Does it, but it doesn't have to come back to the assembly, so we kind of set some higher threshold.
It depends on how significant of a modification. it
Well,
is,
it depends on whether or not we change the site plan that you approve, or we just take the site plan you approve and change it with the state to match what you've already approved. And
But then we bumped up that threshold too, so you could move the wall and so on.
right, so everything that we've submitted for with our special land use permit, that is with the city application, is what we intend to do. We shouldn't be changing that, so we just have to go back and kind of backpedal to the state and say, this is what we changed.
We have rarely gotten comments against, but you had a couple. Some neighbors, you're near East Cafe, you kind of within the, I mean, I think it looks like your measurements are fine, but kind of the area. And a couple neighbors, have you talked to them?
Well, they've spent a lot of time at Mountain View Community Council, having great ideas. Like, you know, there's a lot of kids that get hassled by people walking around that area, and so we've come up with, like, you know, an idea to donate plunger tape for kids to, you know, wear so people can see kids going. And Community Council seems to really like us. I think people are just nervous because that's kind of a high crime area, and they don't want to see any more increases in crime. But, you know, not being fully educated about, you know, what this is going to be, outdoor lighting, surveillance, this whole undeveloped lot will now be developed with parking standards and whatnot. So we'll actually end up, you know, hopefully not having a negative impact on the crime in the area, but I think that's really where their fear comes from. We've heard there's a lot of crime in that area. You know, Mountain View Community Council has a lot of concerns, but they were very proactive in working with us, and they're actually being pretty excited. But I think that's where most
That's the closest.
When it was near residential, we had a lower bar for change.
It's not by a residential district, it's just by one single house that's in the middle of a industrial area.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
zoning
it's
is
just
still
one.
B3.
Oh, yeah, it's not a residential zoning.
Okay.
I think that's it.
So how close do you know, Grant?
Once I get through this permitting process, I hope to be open in 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
A lot of our work has been done prior, it all depends on the contractor too. I mean, what you have, what they tell you they'll do and can't do, and then when they have to show up that day,
Is that right?
might be a little different. So I'm shooting for the 1st of May.
Okay. Any thoughts from anyone else?
Did the agriculture, they checked with MLP to make sure they get sufficient power for that.
You done that yet for?
I couldn't hear.
Did you, get enough electricity for cultivation?
No.
Cultivation.
No.
Have you met with MLMP yet? I know it's not part of this because it's
Not yet.
retail, but
What my primary focus is to get this done up and running, operating, and then start addressing, as I have the funding, the cultivation plan.
it's gonna, they normally want ahead of time so they can try and get power brought in when you need it. So
Correct.
as soon as you can get talked to them.
I have a brother who's an electrician who's doing a maximum limit rural Washington. We've been spending time down there, so I understand the power need
Argumentative.
and the time that it takes to get it in.
So, thank you. So we have a recommendation?
Yeah, I would like to approve on this one. The one thing I would say to Jenna's point, we were talking about crime in the area, this isn't retail yet, but if your previous case holds true, you might actually improve the immediate area because of security thing and that, things like that. We'll see, if that other one was an outlier or if this is a trend. I think a lot of it depends on the operator. Likely, if you're a good operator and proactive, I think your neighbors really won't have a problem with you. But if, we've seen times where we've had an alcohol example. Who was that one over at 13th in Minneapolis?
Oh, heaven, Jess.
That
Do
was,
you remember?
Yeah, it was a bottle store.
There have been incidents where we've had high populations of inebriates congregating around one specific vendor, and they got shut down. So you should be fully aware that somebody has taken that action with alcohol in the past. So it's really the operator's best interest basically to be proactive and make sure you don't become the source of the problem in the community's eyes, whether it's true or not in the community's eyes.
We anticipate that already.
Yeah.
And part of our plan is, one, we'll have posted in the parking lot to no smoking area, and we will enforce that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you'll watch most of the businesses that are up right now, just watch just for a few minutes, watch the parking lot. Most people come in, you can drive in, park, go in, buy whatever they want, come back out, drive away. Younger people tend to sit there in their car.
Right.
I watch that. I also have a brother who's doing a very large retail in Washington. I'm learning from both brothers on what to look out for, what to anticipate, and I look at clientele and make sure you police your area.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons we also installed the loop around system on this one. So an employee's gonna come out, 1 to 2 hours, do a loop around the actual building of retail, and then also go over to the parking lot and just peek her out and make sure everyone's
We also have cameras.
well, and cameras.
Gary?
One thing I would note it's more a side note really to a lot of this is that this is a project that really highlights some of the issues of going into either the multiplex or duplex facilities and whatever around town, and we have them in all of these strip malls that we've got. But for we in the planning to do the reviews and for the permitting process, we have to review them on a per parcel basis, not on a per individual business that goes into them. And this is really a case where that comes to light because there are two businesses in there. The parking of the previously assessed 5 parking spaces doesn't work. If it was only the parking that was required to meet that the marijuana business that's there, it would be 5 parking spaces or less, which would not trigger landscape requirements. But this is a building that houses not just a marijuana establishment, it houses also another establishment that's dealing in wholesale materials and so forth. But we have to go by what code says the parking requirement for that is, and ultimately we hit 10, and at 10, it triggers the landscape requirement. So this is one, I mean, on the downside, they've been hit with that, with the need to help come up to that level, because they're the ones who really sort of triggered this development on the site. But this is a vacant lot, and one of Title 21's goals is to take some of these places that have looked good for so long and allow them to raise that bar. And so as development comes along, it's a way for us to improve those kind of lots through development ultimately. So I completely understand the issues of having of feeling like you've been burdened with maybe more than your share of the load on this one. But at the same time, we have to view these projects in terms of parcel and not business. So.
And we do get, as long as we have the accessible space, we can have up to 18 months to complete all the other improvements, correct?
Okay, so we had a recommendation for approval.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Second, any objections? Okay. Well, thank you, good luck.
Thank you.
So, what we do is we'll go forward at the assembly and recommend approval of this, but it'll go to a vote as the assembly. You never know.
But usually, if this committee recommends it, there's usually not a problem.
Okay. Moving on to unrelated to marijuana, farmers markets in park. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, a while back we had noted that any text notices Title 21, it was a good idea to have this committee hear those before going to the full assembly, so that way at least a handful of assembly members have some backstory on it. So this one is part Title 21 cleanup and part forward thinking. The planning department is underway with a rezone project to take all dedicated parks and rezone them from their current zoning, which could be POI, or any number of other zoning districts, and then rezone them all to the PR, which is the Parks and Recreation District. So in doing so, the table of allowed uses in current Title 21 does not allow for farmers markets to occur in the PR district. So we have two farmers markets right now. There's one in Centennial Park, and then the Muldoon Farmers Market is hoping to relocate to Muldoon Townsburg Park, which will be rezoned to PR. And in order for those two farmers markets to exist in those two spaces, they need to have farmers markets be a permitted use in the PR district. So what we also did, we added it to get the River Park Recreation District as well. And then I know, John, you had some questions about Girdwood and Old Code. So under Old Code, farmers markets were permitted in the PLI district as under temporary commercial uses and structures. And then in Girdwood, they're permitted, and it's a big long code citation, 21.09.040. 4DIB.
Oh, one of my favorites.
And it's worded a little differently in Girdwood Code. It's stated as a community fair or special event. And if farmers markets would fall under that. So those are allowed in the GIP district, which is the Girdwood Institutions and Parks District.
And everything in Forest Fair.
Correct.
Okay. And this went through the planning commission?
Yes. So there is a planning and zoning resolution 2017-004 attached behind the memorandum.
Any thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, I know that the Northeast Community Council is hoping our contractor gets finished developing the front part of our new park this summer. They wouldn't mind moving the farmers market to the new park this summer if the contractor gets done early enough. I don't expect
farmer's market stuff. Soon.
So what's the process for putting, so someone has a farmer's market and they want to, or someone wants to set up a farmer's market in the park, what is the process?
So if it's within a park, Parks and Rec handles all the permitting for that, and they make the judgment call, if it's permitted or not, or how many people will be visiting, so on and so forth. If it doesn't occur in a park, it's my understanding traffic would be special events permit.
So the Spinard Farmers Market's on Chilko Charlie's parking lot, do they have to do anything?
I think that I've looked into this. If you're having the farmer's market on private property, then everything's fine. If the parking can be accommodated on that property or on another property, that's fine too. If the parking has to go into the right of way, then they have to get a right of way permit and get that permitted. Traffic basically, traffic department coaches people that you don't need any permitting if the parking will be in a bona fide parking lot. But if it's going to, there won't be sufficient parking, it'll go into the street. There's traffic engineer and the right of way division looks at it to ensure safety and so that people don't get cited by the police department for illegal parking. If they're having a concert, say in the parking lot of Chilko Charlie's, then they go for those special event permits where they're like, we know that we're going to have this big noses to, big party thing, and parking is going to be in different places, and so they work out off-site locations for parking, direction and cones. It's the same thing if you were filming a big movie or something like that. It's a special event.
Okay. Okay.
Let's say I wanted to have a farmer's market at Walter Lake Park, which is 17-acre piece of parkland off of Tudor and Shelcott. Adequate parking's there because we play soccer there, so there's lots of parking spots. Could I put one into there?
If the Parks and Rec Department grants, allows it to, sure.
Thank you.
So the park has certain parks that they do permitting for, and they have restrictions within a few of those parks. So it kind of depends on where they're wanting to do it. That one doesn't sound familiar to the list that I was given from the Parks Department. But the clerk's office has been working with them, and as Francis was saying, anything that's on private property, they just need the permission of the property owner. They wouldn't need a municipal license. They may need health permits. They may need a few other like the parking and stuff. But if it's on public property, if it's on any of the Easy Park parking lots, they're required to have a roving vendor license as well as any health permits if they're needed.
So let's say this one is all parkland, we can call St. Dave's to me.
Right, and so park also, it's considered public land, and so they would need a roving vendor and then a park permit.
So what's the clerk's office? What's your role?
I do licensing in the clerk's office.
So there's a license to do?
One-stop shopping.
Yeah.
I didn't know you'd be involved.
Alka marijuana parks.
Okay, so any thoughts? No, Terry.
I would just say that I had the conversation with Parks on this a little bit because you can imagine that in some of these really small neighborhood parks that they could impact the neighborhood specifically. And when we were looking to write this up, one of the thoughts was, well, do we identify parks of a certain size? How do we go forward with it? And our thought was, Parks already goes through a pretty rigorous look at these, and in fact, it goes to the Parks and Rec Commission when they talk about where it's appropriate to happen and when not. So it's our sense that just allow these in the PR district and let Parks sort out where the most appropriate places for these to go is.
Okay. Thoughts?
I don't recommend that
Do we want to make a recommendation?
until I have a problem.
Recommend approval by Mr. White.
Okay, we got a
Second.
on that. Second. Any objection? Okay, good.
See a farmer's market in Walter Lake.
Okay, so next is we return to the changing
as we're reading her comments in the section here, so this, because our intent is not to create a secondary market, right? So we talked about the limited way people can transfer licenses. So can you give us a summary? Have you talked to Dean or legal about?
I sent an email and Dean said he hadn't had a chance to look at it yet, so.
If it's a little bit waiting for the turnout. And was there any clarity given? Because my understanding is if we have a problem child, let's say, we can, the assembly, upon notice, can bring the licensee back to the assembly and we can either modify, revoke, or leave the same, or add conditions, or whatever. That's my understanding. Erica seemed to have a different understanding last time. Did you?
I'd want to know if Dean Gates specifically.
Yeah, because I'm confident she was wrong. I don't say that often, but we went through this exhaustively. So I want to make sure right now that my understanding of the law is accurate. That and the question became, did we need to put it in 2 sections or did we just need to have it in 1 section? Because I think Ballsy had ended up putting it under the section where it was like the administrative process, right? Like what happens during hearings. And at my recollection, because I was really grabbed my brain about this after our last meeting, my recollection was when we had this discussion, the Department of Law said that was the place it needed to be, that the assembly did have the full ability to bring somebody back. But I wanted to make sure the licensees had due process. And so that's why there was such an effort on what the notice would look like. But this is something that I want to make sure we have it exactly right, because I want there to be no ambiguity. And I think that gives comfort to the licensees too, knowing that there is a process, and that's what everybody has been told to this point. So
We need Dean to sign off on it because he's the one that's expert on writing this.
yeah. So I think one of the things that might help now that we've lost Erica, I don't know, you and I sat there. Were you on the marijuana committee too? Well, I was going to say, well, there's 3 of us, but we might have to kick one elephant out because it can't be more than 3. But some of us that were
Okay,
on
John, leave.
some of us that were on the marijuana committee, I think it might be helpful for us to sit down with Dean and just because I think I'm recalling it correctly. Otherwise, why would we have pulled Arctic Herbery back, right? But I would like to sit down, just informally and kind of go through it to make sure we understand what we thought we did, and then maybe bring recommendations back to the committee on its ordinance.
I hope John.
Well, we could do that after the committee though, too. We could,
Oh yeah, that's
we have time on
He
this.
absolutely can come. Yeah.
And then it's regular public notice.
Why don't you invite me to the next meeting so we can discuss this? I hope this never has to be used, but I need that avenue in case we have a problem with a bad operator.
Well, I think
And it protects their rights.
we learned our lesson in alcohol licensing.
Remember.
And I think that's why, I think, we're improving our process. And I think that improved process ultimately someday licensing of alcohol is different than the state has licensed stuff.
Well, the state controls it. We just protested the ABC board, but in this case.
But in this case, we learned our lesson. We control licensing stuff. Okay.
Okay, who you got, Jana?
I was going to say, on almost all of them that I've seen, Section 5 has been in there, which is failure to comply with the conditions of this license, the special land use permit, and applicable provisions of the Muni Code shall constitute grounds for modification or revocation of license.
That's the reason that was put in there, right? It's during the conversation. So I was a little perplexed after the last meeting, but
It's always been a condition of the license. I don't know how much, I guess Dean would probably know better than me, but I don't know how much more we need than that.
well, it's a condition of the license, but we want to make sure it's in the code. But that's why I think in the administrative part of the code where it's talking about licensing, I think that's where we put the process portion. I think.
I'll try to.
It's been a while since I looked at that.
So I want to be clear on this. So this shaded part is in the code now. That's not
The
that.
shaded is what is Erica's recommendations.
Okay, so she recommends this is new language here.
So anything that's underlined would be new, anything that's in brackets and capitalized would be what she's proposing to be taken out.
But this isn't, this section 6 is the whole page. It's not.
It's not, and what I think she's saying is the state and the city are interpreting this differently.
Yes.
Okay, so that's in the code.
Am I reading that right? Correct.
So the changes are what's underlined in C3 and C4.
Yes.
And this just says, how do we do it?
Well, and I think because there's this conflict between state and city, that's in part why Dean would be helpful to look at that, to say if there's something we need to clarify, because the state can do however they want to do it. But what we need is, we don't want to create a secondary market, and we've been,
Since the beginning, we do not want a secondary market of any shape, manner, or form. That actually came to debate last night, dealing with taxi cabs. Talking about Miramar, John talking about secondary market. I want to make sure that never happens with marijuana license.
Don't we kill that anyway, even if they have to come up for license renewal every year? I mean, you don't, if there's a secondary market, it's only for maximum 12 months.
I don't know, I want to make sure it doesn't ever happen.
But even though there might not be a secondary license for the business, if it has a successful track record, the business itself may have value. So we have to set it up so that we don't misconstrue the value of the license with the value of the business.
and that's for the private sector to sort out, I think.
And you have to be able to make sure that if somebody dies, that their heirs aren't just like, I mean, 'cause a lot of these people are dumping their retirement accounts in, with the hope that if they pass away, their heirs are still going to have something to rely on. So, somebody shouldn't just invest everything they have and then if they croak,
Well,
that's a violation of the Constitution.
that was our intent when we set it up, to say that would be a situation that would be. So, for example, husband and wife, everything's in the husband's name,
just wondering how much more we can load on that position before it becomes unworkable. So at what point is the determination made as to whether it comes to the assembly or the administrative hearing officer? Who makes the determination?
That would be something I'd have to, clarification from Erica's intent on this front.
I'd like to know who makes the decision.
Today. Good.
I have real concerns about this language, and the way it's written, the assembly may refuse to renew a license, or the administrative hearing officer may suspend or revoke. Just grammatically how this is written, it looks like it's taking away the assembly's ability to modify, suspend, or revoke, which I'm sure it says it in other parts of the code, but I think this is basically mudding up the water. It's not, there needs to be a very clear line. If you just read this in context, it looks like the assembly can do this, or the hearing officer can do that, but the assembly can't do it all, which is not acceptable in my view. And the other thing is, when it comes to who hears what out of these potential revocations, modifications, or whatever, I don't remember seeing, I just don't remember the section where it clearly delineates this goes to the hearing officer and this goes to the assembly.
That's what I'm saying, we need to have it
Yeah, I don't remember seeing
broken
that.
down somewhere.
So I need a refresher on that because I just don't remember it. So if it's not there, or if it's just that I don't remember.
So I think with this, the municipal clerk's procedures for revoking or non-renewal of licenses that are the clerk's business licenses, the clerk can either act as the hearing officer or request the administrative hearing officer handle the case. So, my understanding is it would be kind of a similar, like the clerk's office with the licensing portion would see if there was any issues or violations and would probably notify the assembly this is what's been going on with the license. And so I think Erica was getting at that it would be the assembly's decision of whether you want to delegate it to the clerk's office to handle as administrative hearing officer or if it needed to go to the assembly.
And I think it goes back to with marijuana, the assembly wanted to keep essentially control. So we're going to have to see at our next meeting what the process is for the municipal clerk to make these decisions, because I don't remember it being delegated to her. So we need to understand what the process is, because I'm probably guessing with violations of marijuana, there's going to be something that's going to have to trigger at least notify the assembly. Because you might have great confidence in the clerk's office, but when it comes to marijuana, the community holds us responsible. So it's just, I have to understand that process.
Or Becky, course can come and course can go. I've seen a few of them. I want to make sure we've got this written down. And we can, some do, some don't.
Yeah, except for Smith.
Okay, and reading this now, it does, assembly may refuse to issue a license, or the administrative hearings officer may suspend or revoke a license issued under this chapter and impose a civil fine if the assembly or administrative hearings officer finds that a licensee for any marijuana establishment has done any listed thing. So it does sound like if the assembly found that these things have occurred, we can tell the administrator through the administrative officer to pull the license.
Well, that's not how, well, maybe. I mean, I'm reading it like, I just think basically it's making it worse, not better. I think it's making it less clear, because in my view, the assembly can, at any time, given the proper notice, can pull the license back in front of the assembly to reevaluate it, modify it, change it, revoke it. We have that ability, but the way you read this, to me, it says, well, we can just refuse to renew a license. I don't want to be able to say, okay, here's something we found, their license should be revoked, so now we have to tell somebody else to do it. I don't think so.
Well, you could, maybe, it sounds like they wanted that refuse to renew in here. But you could do, the assembly may refuse to renew a license, then start a new C and add the assembly, put the old language, the assembly or the administrative hearing officer may suspend. So that first sentence
we're missing it here too, because, I mean, the assembly should be able to refuse to renew, modify, revoke, or suspend a license. I mean, all the above, right? Now,
I want the assembly to have, as we started out with this, Amy, we want to have absolute control over this. I don't want some administrative hearing officer charting their own path. I want to know specifically what authority we give the administrative hearing officer, what goes to somebody, so the industry knows.
yeah, no, I think that's fair. And so I think this language right here is just adding confusion in my mind, anyway.
Somebody got up for sure.
Well, is it clear somewhere else in the code that assembly may refuse to renew a license? That almost sounds like okay. Maybe that wasn't there.
It sounds kind of like it should have been.
Yeah, so that would be good. So if we broke that out and then restored the language to what it was, that had a new
So
set.
originally, it was the assembly or administrative hearing officer may suspend or revoke a license. So the underline is what Erica had proposed putting in. And I think that's kind of what she had said at the last meeting, was her understanding was that there were limits. And so that's part of that question of legal looking into
Yeah, that's
what
wrong. I
was,
still think she's wrong on
what was originally there, so.
Well, it's interesting here because the way the old wording suggests is the administrative hearing officer refused to renew a license. That's not correct. That's an assembly officer. Moving it up here, then that's only the assembly. So I'll take a look at making B that assembly may refuse to renew a license. It's B, then start a new section C. That's the, it says the assembly or the administrative hearings officer may suspend or revoke a license issued under this chapter, and if it's so fine, gives the assembly release law. At least as a starting point, and then have to look at that.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So if you move up and look at A, it already talks about what the municipal clerk can do, suspend or revoke marijuana establishment license issued under this chapter. Any licensee is convicted of violating provision of the law.
So this is specific to criminal convictions. If they lied about their criminal history and it's found out, that is specific to being able to revoke it immediately for that.
That just goes to previous convictions.
All right.
Language in there.
And that's the municipal clerk, and that's different from the administrative hearings officer. That needs to be separated. Who is administrative hearings officer and clerk's office?
So, the municipal clerk can act as the officiant over a hearing. Or they could choose to request an administrative hearing officer. And kind of the way the clerk's office has done it in the past is if it's not as complicated of an issue, the clerk's office will handle it. If it's more of a legal issue, it's usually referred to the administrative hearing officer.
And that's an attorney somewhere.
Yeah.
She works, like I said, she originally took the job of 4 days a week. I forget her name, but she took the job of 4 days a week. Now she's trying. When I talked to her, she said it really needs to be a 5 days a week job. So we may have to, if we add more things in her plate.
Is that because of marijuana?
No, she's a lot of other things going on.
A lot of other
Everything from dogs to cats to
to
zoning issues.
pawn shops to zoning issues.
So can we try splitting that up? And then have
Yeah.
that run by you?
I think that's a better way to do it.
They'll come in and look at that. Got that, man? Okay, so that, and then we had page 17 regarding appeals. Starts right at the bottom, and the title's on the bottom of 16, but it's on 17. And that was
how we got the, hearing.
Permitters saying hearing officers should come to the assembly, and then if they don't like ours, they need to go to the Superior Court.
That's a good question.
Okay, so this is odd because the hearings officer is generally appealed before court, and this week has you go straight to court.
So this is a final decision by either the assembly or the administrative hearing officer, suspending or revoking the license. The applicant can then appeal that decision to Superior Court. So it would go from the decision of either the assembly or the hearing officer, and then appealing to a Superior Court of that decision.
So your thought is hearing officer should appeal to the
Well,
assembly.
I just don't know what, I don't know what the law is. I know decisions, somebody doesn't like at the assembly, that's how we've gotten other cases that are remanded back to us. They do get appeals to the court. Somebody doesn't, that's effectively like what we did. Now, the court may not hear it, but that's where it goes. But I'm not familiar enough with an administrating hearing officer to know what the
One that
recourse
you were
is.
at, hey, do you remember that one that we did?
Yes,
That was sent back to us from the Superior Court.
yes, it
remember?
was. Yes, it's because the assembly fails to get due process. Mhm.
Okay, so that's a deep gate question.
It is
Does the
definitely.
administrative hearing officer appeal goes to Superior Court, or would it be to us?
Would it be more appropriate to go to the assembly? Yeah, because I'm just not aware of other, and he would probably know right away whether other court cases that the hearing officer has heard have been gone to court or not. I just don't know the answer.
Okay, so that's a D. We'll have Dean will be in the spotlight next week.
As we heard it.
Okay, so that's all I had, just going through from last. Anybody have anything else?
Well, I just want to weigh in on the last question. It's very, very typical that they're trying to protect the legislative body by taking it to a hearing officer and then to court. You're setting it up so the facts are all in place and that it's all been reviewed for the code.
So they do it that way. Are you saying they do it that way
So
now?
it's usually like assembly, and then my understanding was then if you don't like the something, you go to appeal to the hearing officer.
No.
So, okay.
That's
so-
not right.
So then, you're gonna have to look at the if you're talking about administrative law, you have to exhaust as an applicant, we have to exhaust our administrative, remedies.
The assembly is the final arbitrator at the city level. But my question was, I don't deal with the AHL, so I don't necessarily know. I'm sure they've been appealed to somebody, and I'm guessing it's probably court. I just don't know.
Yeah, and see, and I don't really know if you can maybe you can interchange like the clerk with the administrative hearings officer. I think you kind of get into trouble making this like horizontal understanding of like assembly here, administrative hearing officer here. I don't think you can put those like on the same.
I don't think the clerk is interchangeable with the hearing officer.
Yeah, and that was the other, and that's what I heard.
I heard the conversation, but that's why I wanted to go through the process. We'll dig into that further.
So now, Hal, are you saying that in Anchorage, it is not unusual for a hearing officer decision to be appealed to Superior Court?
I was saying in other jurisdictions, including in Alaska, we would have an administrative officer that would then, it would kick over to court at that point.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So then we would become the quasi judicial body in
If it's an
that
appeal,
case.
if it's an appeal, yes. So here's the thing I like about administrative hearing officers. Number one, they're attorneys, which now the body has been overrun by them, but I do like the fact that they are looking at the facts and they're looking at the code and it's yes or no, did they or did they not, right? Comply. So that's the part that I like about hearing officers. But you're right, anything that gets kicked to the assembly as an appeal is part of the judicial function, which, that's why I liked our 3-member panel, because I think it was the most efficient way to deal with it.
Well, there was one point that assembly subcommittee for appeal.
We appointed a 3-member committee to deal with administrative appeals. This one incident. So the whole body didn't have to hear it, just our 3 panel did.
It was like a
And she did a
trial.
good job.
Yeah, I got to hear it, thank you.
Well, could we make that, we have an appeal and form that committee for that one issue?
Or you could have standing committee or whatever. I mean, and the thing is though, you have to make sure that you're it's just like a trial. So,
You have to go through the whole process. You can't talk to her, you can't talk to her. So no ex parte contact,
Just for those 3.
just for those 3.
Those
well,
three make the
once,
decision.
actually,
But once once it comes to the whole assembly, it's.
Yeah, I was gonna say, once the appeal kicks the assembly wasn't allowed to talk until the thing was over, but, yeah, but so those three hold a hearing, they gather evidence, they question witnesses, whatever, and then they, consult with legal counsel, they write their decision, and then they present all the facts, everything to the full body, and then the body rules.
And is that typical in the cases of an appeal?
Typical. There was nothing typical in this case.
But it's just
It was the first
It's a
time in like 10
process
years.
that I would like to see put into the assembly process. So if we have somebody comes forward, again, we've got the process in place to do it.
you're not
Because it
waiting
worked.
to have an appeal, now you got your.
I want it ready to go when something like this happens.
That would be a good
Work.
question.
Well, and, you know, you have to remember, 10, 15 years ago, the assembly used to hear a lot more of these quasi-judicial things, and that's when a lot of things
Yes, we
were
did.
broken out, and a lot of things were given to P&Z, or they were given to other boards to take appeals on them. And so the assembly delegated a lot of its responsibility, but
You were asking one time why we met 4 times a month. That was the reason.
I think a lot of it has to do with alcohol.
It's crazy.
Can we go back to page 16? We talked about this with Erica before, and there was some discussion about seized marijuana product and who has to hold that and contain it. And so we were talking about it here, seized marijuana products. Remember we were talking about changing the word shall to may?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that change made in here. And the big concern with this last meeting was,
It was how they would have to destroy the product.
shall then either be used beneficial or secured on one. Well, it looks like she kind of, well, that's an interesting way to do it. Maybe she did change it.
Yeah, I think she did.
Because what she's saying, what I was saying is you shouldn't make it mandatory that the seized marijuana product shall be inventory, because it might be something that the official wants to take. So she basically put in here, instead of saying may be inventoried there, instead she said, well, it shall be inventory, or the official shall then remove it. So instead of just using may, she used shall twice with an or.
We should be concerned about plants, because plants are going to grow, and you
Yeah.
got to maintain the plants to help them keep
I
growing.
think she wanted, I think her intent was that everything on site would be inventoried, so everything was accounted for. And then if certain items needed to stay on site or be taken, the inventory would have happened initially, so there wouldn't be any issue with something disappearing or something being added.
So, can you just have Taylor review that language? I mean, I understand what she's saying, because I think she accomplished probably the same thing. I've just never seen it written that way.
There's,
You say, you shall do either this or this, and otherwise, why don't you just say you may do this? I don't know.
because it makes it clear though, what do you do? One of two things, instead of may, opens it up manually.
That could
You
be-
do this, and then what?
Yeah, that could be very.
Two choices, you remove it or you leave it for something.
Mhm.
Okay, that was good. Anything else from there?
I think it'd be helpful to have a lawyer with us.
Well, just for industry, so have you been tracking these, I mean, is anything we're doing making that license so skittish that people are, they're
think you're right though, but then it goes to where it's capped, and then it does start to increase the liability.
Yeah.
Because the state will have to make that determination, because right now, they're gonna flip the market with licenses.
Yeah, and at some point, the industry will be mature enough to realize, hey, that's not good, and we'll be pushing for it. And when we push for it, we're really gonna expect, or hope that the Assembly works with us to make that make sense. Because if we don't have a mechanism to transfer, we'll be too scared to push for cattle licenses.
I think if you run into a situation, fundamentally, we started, when we were talking about the taxi industry, fundamentally, the Assembly almost unanimously, if not unanimously, said that they were not going to push for a market like you're discussing. Because we've seen the pitfalls, frankly, of the taxi industry. And so there was a fundamental unanimous decision, I think it was unanimous, I can't remember one person.
I don't think anybody voted against it.
To say we're going to let the market do what the market does, and we're not going to count them. Now, we talked about maybe density and stuff like that, so maybe it would be, of course, people can sell the assets in their business, but no one is saying that you shouldn't be able to transfer your assets to your family or whatever. But there is going to be a very strict, limited basis in which the Assembly, or there's already one, that the Assembly is saying, right now we're saying they're not transferable. Period, right? But I think that we recognize there's a reason why you make exceptions, and I think that those exceptions have to be approved by the Assembly. Yeah, and I think that's reasonable, and we just need to be clear about what we mean and how those mechanisms happen. But I haven't heard one person say that husband dies, he shouldn't be able to, the wife shouldn't be able to take over. But what we don't want to see is a closed market like you were describing, because frankly, some of us have seen it in other industries, and I don't know that it's helpful.
You have to change state law to make that happen.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. There's no doubt. We have so far. So.
Okay, so I think we have 4 points for Dean to come back
And then-
next meeting.
Can I kind of get your feelings on the email?
Yeah, let's go through that.
So kind of similarly, this is in regards to an applicant who has stated their intent to change their DBA name. They've recently submitted that to AMCO, but they have to wait until they're heard by the ABC board to get, or I think it's marijuana control board, to get that finalized. So, for kind of clarification of our code, I found 2 places that we would handle that kind of change. It would be with their renewal application or by request of Assembly approval. And so there's a $0 charge to request that kind of change, but the Assembly has to approve it. And in talking with Barbara, I was kind of trying to get some clarification of, would we want to add language to make minor changes like that delegated to administrative approval? Or would you like it similar to liquor licenses where it would go on the agenda, it would be an AR on the consent agenda. If there's issues, it could always be pulled, but this way that you would be recorded that this was a name change, this is what happened, and you could approve it with the regular consent agenda and not have to have a hearing on it.
I think that makes sense. I mean, if it's just a business name change, I wouldn't think we would need to go through a whole hearing situation. The consent agenda makes perfect sense to me.
Just an AR in the consent agenda.
Okay. And would there be other similar changes that you'd like kind of outlined in that?
Contact information,
Because I know we've touched on
like
this.
email. I think we can say contact information that covers email, phone numbers, addresses. Obviously, not the address of the business, but.
I'd see something, time period for renewal, like you can't change
they're coming up for renewal, we would know, and then you wouldn't have to put anything in there necessarily, because it would tell you right there, boom, you know, Alaska Lead is changing their name to Northern Lights. You know, they're renewing in, you know, they have their application and they're renewing in 30 days.
We know they're renewing it because everybody.
Yeah, everything's right, but in years to come, it won't, may not.
Or we may shift
Yeah.
that schedule.
Yeah, I would assume it might, I don't know.
And so much alcohol licenses over the years. We should have just had in this case.
Do you think that's an okay solution, Dick?
I think so.
So not set a time limit, but just make sure, should they change their name, we have a little
You know,
reminder that, hey, this
this
is.
license is coming up for renewal on such and such date.
And I think the clerk, that administrative, they can deal with that, we don't have to have the list for them.
Didn't we believe that
Do what?
Like the DDA name change that's done on the planning side.
We don't track them.
We moved some changes in their premises, like if they moved the door or something like that, we don't even look at it now, right? Interior and less
Yeah,
than X percent of space or something like that. I mean, you almost say those are more significant than the name change.
I think
So
so.
I'd almost say you guys can do it, I don't even want to know. I mean, if they come up for renewal, the trick there is say formerly known as this, you know, if it was in the last year, the name were changed, I'd say the renewal notice say the license was under this name, additionally you changed to this name all at once.
And doing business at the same location.
Right.
I honestly don't think the name change is that big of a deal. I mean, the key that Dick pointed out is to make sure we understand we're dealing with this person at this location. And they used to be known as Art Burberry,
Right.
and now they're whatever.
We're just gonna bring a name for it, Amy, I'm shocked.
And they're called something else. I could think of confusing.
But that's easy to do, renewal, and that's the kind of thing we'd be looking at in renewal, so.
Yeah, and that is.
We're getting bogged down with name change. I don't think, once you have a name for your business, you're
Well,
gonna hang on.
and that's why I said when name changes, addresses, email, that kind of stuff, frankly, I don't find to be significant. But if you want to know about them, I would not do it for hearing. But I think it's perfectly adequate to, you know, administratively deal with this stuff
We
too.
were gonna get quarterly reports on whose license status of people who've approved name change, I call them.
Well, you and you'd have to do that. You could put X name, right? Formerly known as Y name. I mean, that's pretty easy.
This will make sure our institute can track it.
Well, and the one thing about administratively, and, you know, you guys, when you first were talking, kind of nailed it, and this is why I said I could believe your way on this one, but administratively, it's not necessarily in the public record if it doesn't get on the consent agenda. So I don't know how big of a deal this is for people. Like I said, I'm fine with taking that renewal, but I can't imagine there's consent agenda.
Yeah, I'd like to keep it simple, not have agendas that go into the triple letters. So where we're at, keep it at the, where's that one, the.
Leave it deep.
Yeah, I mean, just a simple name change, put it on the consent agenda, unless somebody, one of the members wants to talk about it, or you got a call from the neighbor or whatever.
Should we not even have it come to the assembly? Just have it noted in the regulation.
We could, but, I mean,
So, this, specific case, they are wanting to do the name change as soon as possible. And so they've already done their signs, they've already done business cards with the new name, and their license with the state and the city still has their previous name. The owner is still Alaska Sense LLC, but now it's doing business as Anabasca instead of Alaska Sense LLC doing business as Alaska Sense LLC. So,
Anabasca, that's a terrible name. Okay, I digress. Well, so this
so
person,
they want their licenses to match what they're advertising.
no matter what, they're gonna have to go through the assembly, because we just don't have this done yet. So I guess the question, because I could go either way with this one, I just don't see this as being super significant, as long as we can track the assembly when it ever
Eventually, there's gonna be hundreds of these.
Yeah, well, and like I said, I can't
Dozens.
imagine, I can't imagine name changes, there'll be a lot, but there will be a lot for email, contact information changes, and I personally don't care, because I'm not contacting who Mandy is, so. Is that okay?
But yeah, and people may come up with better business names, more than.
Not Canvas.
Okay, so is it gonna be on the consent agenda, the name changes?
Yeah.
We just do
And
it
then-
administratively through the.
Well, it doesn't sound like
So
it.
it will also depend on whether it's an actual transfer of ownership within it. So if it's, like in this case, there's no other change, there's no transferring of.
So the community council's not gonna know?
They can send them notice.
Yeah, that would be, I think that would be good because, I mean, something that's like,
Well, and Mandy can do that administratively.
yeah.
Can you do that? And also, I think contact information would be important, because they have their agreements or whatever, their neighborhood planning.
Yeah.
So these type of changes, if the clerk's office makes a change like that, I think just to give notice to the community council is very easy, that's a great thing. Are you good with that, John?
Yeah, sounds great to me. Okay, so, Matt, you're gonna redo this then with that, and then put it in a new version of this for next meeting. We'll highlight just what is needed to look at. Then we'll review this again.
Mr. Chair, if you're finished with that discussion, I have a question for Mandy.
Sure. I think we're done.
I haven't read the draft ordinance, so I apologize if you've already covered it or didn't cover it, but, Alaska Slow Burn, the case that we just, looked at, in the committee today, right? And, should they be approved on Tuesday? Under this ordinance, will they have to still apply for renewal of their license in a few months, in the very same year that they get approved? Just want people to be aware.
Yeah, and.
That sounds it's kind of weird.
So this was something,
It's just like your business license.
yeah, I mean, it's just like the business license. We don't, with any of the business licenses, they've never been prorated or, it's set in code, it's a specific time frame. So, this was kind of followed after that. And also the state is doing the same thing, so we're mimicking what the state's doing. But Erica did mention that, and so, Ryan and I kind of sent a couple of emails back and forth, and we haven't solidified anything yet, but maybe adding something to the emails that I send out whenever I get notice that they're initiating. I now send an email saying, the clerk's office has received your notice that you're initiating a license. Maybe add a blurb at the top in red saying, if you're submitting your application at this date, please note you'll have to resubmit for a renewal on this date.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And is it the fees change at all, or are they the same?
It's kind of up in the air, and that was something else. I don't know, did you guys
The
decide?
fees are a little bit less on the state side from renewal,
Yeah.
because we don't, there's like an extra fee for application review that we don't do.
And this was something that Erica had,
Dorothy?
on page 9, Erica had added some language and added some proposed fees for the renewal application and whatnot. Right now, we don't have any fees for renewal or late renewal, anything like that.
So the licenses run on a calendar year basis instead of from the day they started until the next year.
Oh, she added,
I mean, given how many take them like it's on the agenda, I think it's better to group them for the first couple of years. But for you to keep track of,
It is kind of weird.
Mandy? Mandy, what's the process if somebody doesn't apply for renewal of license? Do you remember with tow truck companies? We had people 4 or 5 months later never applying for their renewal.
So,
So what's the process when they have a marijuana reach out that doesn't apply for a license?
if by midnight of August 31st, there is no renewal, it's gone. So
how do
their
we-
license.
Who do we
will
send
be-
out to check and make sure that it's no longer in operation?
The state goes and checks on this also because that's similar to theirs. So it would be, for our end, it would be code enforcement.
expiration after this date.
And that's something really catch early.
I just want to make sure Jack Frost and people know about it.
So they have to apply by August 31st when their license is due for renewal on the 1st of January.
So the renewal period, for non-late, they have to have it in by June 30th. So the regular renewal needs to be in by June. They can have a late renewal that will be in past that, but if they don't have anything by August 31st at midnight, then it's gone, and they'll have to start the whole process over again as a new license.
And is the renewal forms correct?
We are working on this. And I think the state is still working on theirs as well.
Then they are.
Okay, so this is your initial application, your new establishment for to transfer license is 0. So license renewal, so for a new one, there's no cost. We're gonna pay.
Yeah, just the cost of the special land use permit.
And then non-refundable application fee for a renewal is $250. So renewals are 200, so initial one's free, renewals are $250.
And this is the proposal.
Okay.
Right now,
But it
it's
was 0.
no cost, yeah.
Okay. If renewal is late, it's $350.
And we're charging the $250 because that's basically what it costs us just to mail out notice. People living at 500 feet.
I'm not sure where Erica got those from. Yeah, that's what she said, so covering average mailing cost of public hearing notices. Which, doing them as a chunk, I think that's probably pretty reasonable. We're doing them all as one little bit. Does that sound? I think she did it based off of what you guys have done in the past. Is that
Similar
more
to
from
alcohol licenses.
I'm sorry?
Similar to alcohol renewal licenses.
So for licensing, I do not send any mailers out. This is kind of coming, I think, from the land use portion, because they notice I send an email to like community councils, and so I do not send mailers out. But I don't know if that's about the same for liquor licenses for you guys.
Well, we won't be, for renewals.
Renewals, you don't do.
We won't be sending
Okay.
it, so it's kind of not relevant right now.
Okay, well, for the marijuana licenses, they currently are required to have public hearing for all renewals. So it would be noticed for all of those.
You know, the 33 licenses that are currently approved or whatever, come May or June or whatever, they'll be applying for renewal through the clerk's office, and the planning department will be doing what?
So they will have, they'll have public hearings. So if the land use is permanent, they won't need to be heard on that again.
The
So-
special land use permit for marijuana runs with the land. The
Yeah.
planning department, I guess, we kind of feel like we're done.
So then
We're done with it.
So then it
We
would
have a
be
file
my-
that shows
it
that
would be
they're
my
approved.
cost, I
And
guess.
as long as they stay compliant with all their conditions of approval, they're kind of done with the planning department. Or you can keep using the words, public hearing on each renewal with, some sort of public notice of the renewal.
Yeah, I think I was getting
Okay,
all
yeah.
stuff together. But, yeah, so this would be then the public notice from the clerk's office of the hearing of their license renewal.
It's a public hearing requires notice.
But you wouldn't have a public hearing on each one of these for a license renewal.
Yes, currently we are required to by the code.
And that's what we were talking about at last meeting. That's why we changed up the language, so at moving forward, the assembly can say may instead of shall.
That's a good change.
But the recommendation I made last time is, we're gonna have 38, 40, whatever, say you have 100, out there. We can group them by public hearing in groups of 10. So you don't take, people can say, well, 14C is the one the person I have an issue with is in that group. That way we can kind of take it in manageable chunks, but I can see as time goes on, that we're gonna deal with just like alcohol, where they all get on the consent agenda, and if we have a problem, we can pull one, but I think the first year, it's probably a good idea, especially because we've told everybody at all these community council meetings, if you have a problem, come to their renewal, and you can speak, because we'll have a public hearing on it. So, we kind of put ourselves in that situation, yeah, from the beginning. But I think that's the easy way to kind of let us segue into getting it done, just like alcohol.
And so Mandy, does the clerk's office do mail occasionally like this? You're out
No, for what I've done for liquor licenses and, from the beginning for marijuana, it's all been through email. So I've emailed community councils, I've emailed the applicants. And so most of the time with the public hearings, it's done just normally through the agenda process. So we wouldn't be sending out a mailing.
So we don't need $250 for mailing?
I think, I wouldn't say it would be to cover the cost of mailing, but it might be nice to have a renewal fee. The state has
Covers
it.
to have staff time.
Yeah.
Because if you did a mailing, who would you mail to? I mean, you have requirements for the land use permit, but for a license renewal, no one says, every 400 to 500 feet, you have to keep providing.
No, it would just be the general, public noticing that we do for all of the agenda items, would be on the website.
But that's unfair to community council. Who reads those things?
And with liquor licenses, I send out an email to all of the community councils saying, these are the licenses that are renewing within your boundaries for this year. And so that's kind of a once a year notice to them, and we could do something similar. I think Erica's concern with that was that with the public, if we just email the community councils, the public may or may not get that notice.
So what month are you gonna start to do this for renewals? I just wanna make sure community council are not taking their summer breaks.
Well, all the renewals come up in June, July, yeah.
I have,
Community council's gonna be paying attention.
on or before
Well, we
May
can tell
1st
them
of
to,
each
but-
year.
When?
So on or before May 1st of each year, the clerk shall notice that marijuana establishments must file a renewal application. So we would notice the establishments that their licenses are coming up for renewal, and probably the same time we'd notice the community councils. These are the ones that are coming up for renewal in your areas.
So we've told the community council they need to meet throughout the year, not take December, we still have some taking the summers off. And we're gonna get the argument, well, you guys renewed, but we weren't meeting, you knew that was gonna happen.
So how does this 250 compare to hairdresser license? They get renewed every year, or?
What alcohol? What do we charge for alcohol renewals?
We don't, because it's not our license.
Yeah, so Janet just pointed out to me, I don't have a copy of the ordinance you guys are discussing. She pointed out the highlighted underlined section under H, which says that renewal applications for marijuana licenses are done through the clerk's office, but they have to have a public hearing, they have to have a written notice published, posted, and at community council in accordance with refers to Title 21's calling procedures for public notification. So
that is why it's the mailing cost.
Yeah, so that's, so we're,
can I just say a little bit more? So the assembly, when you have something on your agenda, you guys just put it on your agenda. The agenda's on the website. It's just sort of on the internet, right? It's a publicly available document for the assembly's agenda. It comes out a few days before your next assembly meeting. With the planning department's Title 21 stuff, we have different noticing requirements. We require blue signs to be posted at the businesses. We post it on our website and email to all of the property owners and tenants or residents within 500 feet radius of that site. So it's that mailer is terrific job. She's printing out, for each one of these licenses, perhaps 300 letters, and folds them and tapes them and puts them in the mail. And that takes quite a bit of time, quite a bit of paper, and there's a cost to that. I can't imagine her having to do that for 40, 50, 100 marijuana licenses all in 1 month. She's plumb busy just dealing with our existing cases. She spends a significant amount of her time at the copier getting these mailers out the door. She's really short turnaround for those, for all of the cases that we're processing at any one time. These renewals, if this language stands as underlying section, then doing written notice, that's my major concern.
Where is this exactly?
It's number H on
It is
page
what we're looking at.
5, yeah. And I would also add what Francis is saying is, here we're talking about upon complete license of the renewal of the application, so that's talking about the marijuana license. And then it references Title 2103.02H, which also has a chart that only talks about notice requirements for the marijuana special land use permit, and then it checks all the boxes. But we're talking about the marijuana license, the business license, not the permit here. So I'm not sure. Maybe we're just not keeping the two in their own lanes.
Yeah. You could guess that for every 3 marijuana licenses that are up in the renewal, sending out 1,000 of these mailers. Roughly.
And I don't think the intent is here to have the planning department do it. I think the intent is to have the clerk's office deal with this.
Just on the agenda, right?
Yeah, so I think we can deal with it a different way. I have a suggestion, and maybe you would like it, maybe you wouldn't. But would it be helpful, Mandy, for you to have an assembly member work with you on some of these issues to come up with some proposed language for the union team? I would be willing to do that.
Sounds like good volunteering.
I would do that. I know exactly where you're coming from, Francis, and so I think some of these issues we can kind of maybe have a little hammered out plan of attack for the next meeting.
So if you would.
This page.
Yeah.
Revisit this
Yeah,
and
this
say
needs a
maybe
little-
not all the mail.
And I think what Erica was wanting to do with this was if there is a problem, like if it's a problem operator and it's a full hearing request, then we would want to notify the neighbors. We would want to notify, the surrounding area of the establishment that was a problem, that they would come. And I think maybe that's where she was going with it.
Probably, and my guess is this, is there should be a way for maybe the planning department to populate the list for us of the residents around here, and then the clerk's office can deal with the notice. But for referencing here, straight back to Title 21 does make it a little bit more complicated. So, we can come back to that, I think.
So,
Can I say one more thing before we forget? Each one of these blue signs costs the department $12 to $14, and if you're going to post one of these blue signs abutting every constructed street, so not quarter lot, two blue signs that we have to post. The idea that these applicants with their remote will be going down to the clerk's office and coming over to the planning department and putting up blue signs posted in the property 21 days before the public hearing. I guess the mailer and the signs are two things that might logistically be kind of an unfair burden on the applicant. It does get the word out, which is what we're trying to achieve, but it's maybe reserving that just for the problem licenses would be more appropriate. It all depends on the operator, but
And I think we're going to weed through a lot of those, because what we'll see, and this is what we talked about, Francis, before, was if we group these in groups of 10 or 20 or whatever, if there's one or two licenses that we have a lot of people concerned about, people coming in to testify, we can bifurcate that for the rest of them. We can then pass the rest of them, and then we can literally take that one and we can delay action.
As we do every couple of weeks.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Spot on.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I was thinking last week, is if you have an issue that you need to investigate further, you want to make sure there's a robust public involvement. So
So I think we can tweak that and kind of
take the parts and pieces of that notification that we like, and we can create it where there's that opportunity for, they can be instructed to have the person sign it. And then we can have the clerk's office and have the clerk's office mail to the people within 500 feet.
Well, that would be tricky. We have sort of the ability to do the mailer. Yeah.
You have to get the list. Yeah, you got to get the mail list.
Well, but.
That's a lot easier than printing them all out and sending them.
But that's one of those in the weeds technicalities, have to work it out later, but I don't want to give you a heart attack and tell you to notify 50 different applicants. Okay, sorry, John.
Okay, no, that's good, and Jana, thanks for highlighting that. Okay, so you'll get together, look at this, and then we'll add that to the list for your next meeting. We have, I guess that's the last thing we'll talk about. Next meeting, and we're coming up with this. Is there anything else on this then? Okay, 10:33.
Yeah, so I'll follow up with Dean.
When's the next meeting?
And invite Dean and, kind of rework this and get this stuff highlighted for legal.
Next meeting is what?
I would guess, are we meeting, is we enough to meet next week, or can we push out some
The next one is gonna be currently, we'll have one on the 6th, I think. Because we missed some meeting on
fourth still out, is the election.
the. Okay.
Yeah, so we're gonna go 2 weeks without a meeting then, and meet in the third week.
We'll have-
Today's the 16th, today's the 16th.
Yeah, so we have,
Meetings on the 21st.
we won't have one on the 30th.
What about the 21st Thursday?
No, because the next, assembly meeting isn't until April 11th.
So I got this
So
then.
we would have one on the 6th possibly. I need to double check and see. I think we maybe have 2 marijuana licenses up
You
for
replace your extract.
the 11th, so we'll be on the 6th.
Okay, so we can meet on the 6th and then have Dean here last half. And then that meets our schedule, okay, so April is, do we want to have this introduced? When then, did you say the 11th together?
Well, we could, I said, yeah, if we meet on the 6th, I mean, we could either put it on the addendum on the 7th, or we could just go ahead and introduce it on, well, the 18th is election certification.
So it would be
The 25th. So we have 3 meetings in April.
So if this were to hit the April 25th meeting for introduction, are we good for having it ready and fine?
Well, and one of the things too, renewal, she sends out notice May 1st. She sends out.
So close.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we just see what we can come up with? Because I think we could have this ready to put on the addendum on the 7th and introduce it on the 11th, which means we could potentially take action the 25th.
I'd like to, yeah.
So is this, we're talking about the 6th, right?
Yeah.
The meeting's on the 6th. No, I'm talking about our actual assembly process where we put things on the agenda.
Okay,
The
gotcha.
deadline is the 7th at noon.
And then I would just, I don't know how important it is to you guys, but on the 6th is that full day alcohol control board meeting. So I don't know if
Yeah,
anybody.
it's not really important.
No, you guys want to.
We don't go to it.
Okay,
No.
so, and is it,
You don't get a lot.
so we put it on the, you work it, maybe we tweak it, and then real quick, you have to go and fix it, you put it on the agenda.
Or we could even lay it on the table on the 11th.
I hate that even more.
I know.
But I mean, could we, we're pretty close here, so you could email some words, or you could have me write it up, introduce it on the normal schedule, we would look at that and have amendments if we wanted amendments. Is that a better way to do it than the?
Well, I think some of our changes are I don't want to say are substantial, but I think some of our changes could have substantial impacts. So I don't like coming forward, I mean, like the notice one, I think is actually a substantial
Right.
change.
And it could be, we could change a lot of it still.
Well, yeah, and so that's why I would rather not introduce something that we know already is flawed. Yeah. That's just me though.
Well, I wasn't saying, maybe not this, but the changes we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Then you work something out with Mandy real quick, and your changes come into a packet. So it's probably much closer than this. We're probably pretty close.
if there was any final edits,
Yeah.
we'd work on that and then have it ready for the assembly meeting. I try and get it done by the 7th at noon if they're minor, or
Yeah.
if it needed to be laid on the table, absolutely we would do. That could be an option too.
I don't see why we wouldn't have this ready for the addendum on the 7th. I just think it would be. And then the good news about that is you have 3 meetings before you actually take action.
Well, it's introduced then, so, okay. I just want to make sure industry
Yeah,
has a chance to
you
look at
have
it.
3 meetings. I mean,
Okay.
because it actually will technically be introduced on April 11th, right? And then we have a whole nother assembly meeting on the 18th that we don't even deal with it. And then come back on the, whatever days after that, 25th. And then that's the day you plan on taking action. I think that's a doable schedule.
It's doable, but then you have to do a mailing 2 days later. All right, potentially.
Yeah, but the good news about that is now she has her process already solidified in code.
And right now, it's probably the fewest I'll have to do for a mailing from here on out, so.
Okay. So you should almost assume you're mailing.
Maybe for this first
Full-blown
one,
Title
since
21 mailing. Please be thinking.
yeah.
Because how do we, and we're saying only mail ones that we're going to pull because we're worried about them?
Yeah, well, what we're saying is, we can create a standard where, you know, they don't have to, we take out the reference to Title 21 basically. And the standard is if you have somebody, then the clerk, there's a mechanism where the clerk can mail to and require the premises be posted.
And I think maybe for this first one, I have a few that we've talked about that wanted to be, you guys wanted to revisit when the renewal came up, so I have them flagged. And maybe we could see how you feel. I'll email you that list and you can see how you feel about them and whether you want to maybe separate them out as possibilities for full public hearings. But I don't know, I don't know about mailing everybody and doing a full one for this first one.
Well, and my whole point is, you don't send out notice till May 1,
Right.
right? If you pass this before May 1, that issue is done. It's
Yeah.
dealt with. And that's the reason I'm trying to push up the schedule a little bit. I don't want to drag this into May.
Yeah,
Because then you
just do it on
have trouble.
You could just do it on.
We're gonna do assembly members too, on.
Yes. Don't worry,
Pledge revisions.
we'll learn them up.
Okay.
Pledge revisions.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, one way you could maybe put it in there is like, a little bit of language, like, if they're not active yet, and that, you know, active is an actual term that you can look at on the state website, then maybe they don't, you know, they just go straight to the consent agenda, and that way you could just like put it in like, you know, unless your license has not been active in this year, like, go.
Well, and I think in part, that's why we put that word may instead of shall in there, because it gives us flexibility, especially moving forward.